What if I told you that there's a nursing role where you can still advocate for your patients, but you don't even have to leave your house? Hey there, it is your favorite nurse yogi, Lesline, and if this is your first time clicking on my pretty face, thank you. I am a registered nurse with 12 years of healthcare experience, and I'm also a certified yoga instructor with 5 years of teaching experience. And today I'm going to go in my nurse bag and share with you how almost half of my career being a registered nurse has been in utilization review, and it is the best decision that I made career-wise. So make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, and let's get into how you can get a job as a utilization review nurse. So let's get into it. What is a utilization review nurse? So what I do is, and I have a script, so you'll see me look to the side. It's not that I don't care about you. I care about you a lot because I want you to win and I don't want you to be burnt out, because I know the reason I became a nurse is because I care about people. I care about their health, right? And so I know how it goes, y'all. Those first 5 years of my career were ghetto. It was hard, but I needed those 5 years in order to excel in my current position as a utilization review nurse. So as a utilization review nurse, we review patient cases to determine if care is medically necessary and appropriate. You work at the intersection of clinical knowledge, insurance guidelines, and patient advocacy. The biggest thing that everybody likes, it is typically remote friendly. This means that I do not leave my house. I work in this very room, technically taking a break right now to give the girls what y'all need. We need these videos. You need the education, the resources, right? And then also patient advocacy. So again, you're intersecting the clinical knowledge that you know very well, the insurance guidelines. You also, if you're like, girl, I don't know nothing about insurance guidelines, gotta be staying in that people's hospital. Because you have, and I'll be getting to this later in the video, you need to have at least 2 to 3 years of hospital experience. You need to have at least 2 to 3 years of hospital experience because, like I said, when you become a utilization review nurse, it's that intersection of clinical knowledge, insurance guidelines, and patient advocacy. If you have no idea of what a type 2 diabetic patient that's like in DKA looks like, it's going to be very hard for you when you're reading, because you're reading the HPI, the history and physical, to figure out, does this patient really qualify or should they be observation? And I'll get into what I'm saying when I say that, right? And it's a huge lifestyle shift when you become a utilization review nurse. You're going to have your weekends back. You're going to have your life back, right? And God has been so good to me. Amen. Amen. Because I became a utilization review nurse after having my little ones. I have 2 kids. I had them back to back. I had my son in 2018. I had my daughter in 2019. And then we all know what happened in 2020. And I had to go back to the people's job. And I was like, I cannot go back to the people's job. Okay, and at that time, I was working in case management. I'll do a separate video about case management, but that, just to give you overview of my nursing career, 12 years, I've been a registered nurse. Those first 4 to 5 years, I was in and out of every hospital in this greater Central Florida area. You ask me, have you worked there? Most likely I have. Nursing homes, people's homes. I got a lot of great experience. Like, hindsight is 2020. At the time, in the thick of it, I cried every day. I cried every day leaving that hospital. Every single day. I said, my parents said I'm supposed to be a nurse. This is supposed to be the dream life. Why do I hate it so much, right? And so that was like the first few years, 4 to 5 years. And then when I got married, which was, y'all know all my business. When I got married in 2016, I wanted my schedule to match my husband's schedule. He worked Monday to Friday, had weekends off. I didn't feel like I got to like really enjoy being married because I was always at the hospital, right? I'm pretty sure y'all nurses know what I'm talking about. And this was before the pandemic. And I know y'all, it is short-staffed as hell in that hospital. I know it is. I hear about it. And so at that time, though, I was like, I want to mimic my husband's schedule. So I remember, I'll never forget it, because I worked ICU for a stint, y'all. I worked ICU. That was the last place I worked in the hospital before I said enough is enough. And I remember that morning I came home and I said, Indeed.com, case management, because at the time in the hospital, I saw nurses who did case management, and I was like, I like that. Like, I like being able to educate patients, because that's like the crux of what I like to do. I also have my own health and wellness business, Leslie Does Wellness, where I show women how to put themselves first through the use of yoga, and also give preventative health resources through way of my 12-week preventative health care program. And before I created all of that, I've always just been somebody that has been so passionate about health, preventative health specifically. And I liked how the case managers educated the patients. They educated them about their diagnosis, gave them resources, and sent them out on their merry way. I liked that part. So let's go back to that horrible morning, right? Because I work night shifts. So I come home about 8 a.m. and I'm like, Indeed.com, and I was like, okay, case management, because that's what I knew that was like something still nursing, but not bedside, right? Found this job with Children's Medical Services. Y'all gonna really know my resume. Children's Medical Services, where I worked as a case manager for kids and families that, for the kids specifically that had special needs. It was a wonderful experience. I learned so much about autism, ADHD, what else? Like, those are like the top two that were like kids that had cerebral palsy with feeding tubes. I learned so much, and learned how to advocate for my patients through way of calling these parents regularly, making the appointments, being that the squeaky wheel gets the answer, whatever that phrase is. I'm really bad at phrases. I even got to meet some of my patients, because what was really cool, it's no longer there, but what was really cool, the building, because I used to work in the office doing case management, but it was 9 to 5, no weekends, was some of the patients, they would see the doctors on site, which was like another wing of the building. And so I would get to see these patients, and then sometimes that's how I would do my assessment, right? Wonderful experience. Learned a lot about a lot of the barriers that families have that have children with special needs. Then they got bought out, and then I moved from there to another company, and I continued case management there, but for Ambetter, so marketplace insurance, helping adults as they get discharged from the hospital. So calling these people, you get the notification, this patient discharged from the hospital. They had type 2 diabetes, they had DKA, whatever, and then I'm making sure that they do their follow-ups, blah, blah, blah. That's case management. Then I got pregnant, and then I was like, I can't go back to case management because that's still in the office. But the company I was with was a very big company. They also had utilization management. All I knew at the time, y'all, when it came to utilization management, was that it was remote. All the girls that did the utilization management, they were home. And I was like, I need that. And this is where having good people around you, people that want to see you win and have your best interests at heart, and having community. That's what it is, having community. Shout out to my friend. She actually got me the job, and actually got me my current job that I'm now in. That computer is their computer. And she was like, hey, Leslie, so-and-so, I talked with them. We gonna do utilization review for NICU. I said, friend, I have never worked in the people NICU. I've worked ICU and NICU, neonatal intensive care unit. So the baby ICU. I've worked the adult ICU, right? And I was like, but I never worked the baby ICU. I don't know nothing about the babies. And 5 years later, I learned so much about the babies, utilization review wise. And specifically, so this is what we're going to get into, specifically with utilization review, there are two systems. Well, let me follow my script. Okay, yeah. So there, and then I'll keep going, because but you need the story. And this is your first time clicking on my videos. I try my best to be conversational, edutainment, if you will. We kiki, and then I give you like, okay, this is what you need, this is what you need. So once I got that job as utilization review for NICU, the reason I was able to easily get that job, if I'm gonna call a thing, is that I worked case management for that company. So it was an internal transfer. Internal transfers are way easier to do. So if you work bedside, the way, if you're paying attention to what I'm saying, my way that I did things was even though I didn't get a case management job in the hospital, I would suggest that try to get a case management job in the hospital, because typically, case management in the hospital is like a Monday to Friday. You can typically, but sometimes you have to work like a weekend or two a month, but it's way better. It's a more consistent schedule, or a more work-life balance schedule than the 312s, because 312s sound good and dandy, don't they? But over time, they do a lot of wear and tear on your body. So I would say, do the case management in the hospital that you're at, and then see, once you get like at least 2 years of case management experience in the hospital, then try to find an online case management job. And then typically, at least the company I worked for, I can only say my experience, that company also had utilization review, because it was a big company. They did everything like healthcare wise. So like that's how I bada bing, bada boom. Okay. So when I got into NICU utilization review, like I said, I didn't know nothing. I knew ICU, so I know the drips, and I know that they're intubated and those kind of things. But I was like, babies? And then on top of that, with utilization review, there is one software system that we use called Interqual. So Interqual is the criteria that is used to help you determine if the patient is medically necessary. Like, should that patient stay in the hospital or should they go, right? So there are two typical ones. Interqual is the one that I know. And then there's also another one called MCG. M like Mary, C like cat, G like goat. Look that up in your own. I don't know nothing about it. But at this new job that I work, it's a very startup type of place. And not to say too much, but a lot of the hospitals that are, a lot of the insurances that because I work now for a company where I'm third party for a hospital. We are trying to help that hospital reduce their expenses, aka people come to this hospital, but they're readmitting, right? And also they're admitting patients, but they shouldn't be admitting them, right? That costs a lot of money. So that's why we contracted with this hospital to help them reduce their costs. So with that being said, we do the review like for the hospital, send it to the insurance, and then the insurance will then take what we said, and they are the ultimate determiner, because they're the ones that are paying for the patient's stay, right? So not all we do, but as a nurse, we're like, yes, this is medically necessary. Now we need to pick you to fork over the dollars. But what will happen is some of these insurance companies, because I also used to work the insurance. So when I worked NICU utilization review, I worked for the insurance side. So when I tell you there are so many ways you can, when I'm doing that, I mean, there's so many ways you can nurse. So working the insurance side, I wasn't used to this side of, now as the hospital side of the insurance companies being like, hey, we don't use Interqual, we use MCG, deny. That's where we're at right now. Ooh, right? So anyways, when you apply, and I'm always going to be in team, not Delulu, but like, you are watching this video because you are a registered nurse that has worked bedside, and you've worked bedside for at least 3 years up. So you've been bedside for at least 3+ years. Hell, you probably bedside 10+ years if you watching this video and you're like, I'm tired. I am run down. But you worked so hard to get this degree. I know you did. And I want you to continue making money, and making good money, right? So back to the Interqual. Look up, I want you to go on this website, because if you're like, girl, I don't know anything about Interqual, what is that? Go on business.optum.com. And this is going to give you like case studies that you can do. It's going to talk about Interqual level of care criteria. So all that means is you assess clinical appropriateness with specific criteria for admission, level of care, visit recommendations, and maintenance therapy. So that's where I live within Interqual. There's also other different things within Interqual. It's a lot, right? And don't quote me on this, but I am considering getting certified in interqual just to like really solidify my knowledge and also just make me more marketable, as I continue to go other places. So we use interqual. So what does my day-to-day actually look like? It's reviewing inpatient cases using interqual criteria, communicating with physicians, case managers, and insurance companies. So because I work, this is actually the side I do communicate with all of those people, right? And so it's a lot of just making calls. It's not a lot of calls. It is less calls than case management. That was something that I was like, okay, I'm tired of all these calls. When I tell you calling up everybody and their mama because the healthcare system is so freaking broken, right? That it's like you gotta call this person to call that person to call that person to call that person and wait for the call back from the person you called 2 people ago, right? And then you're also calling the patient and the patient didn't answer because they see you, the insurance company, and they don't want to answer the insurance company because they think they owe a bill. Right? So it's just like phone tag all day. So I was like, I gotta leave this, right? I gotta leave case management and utilization review. I didn't know you're mostly just talking to the clinical people, which is nice, right? And then making sure patients gets the right level of care and that it's covered. That's ultimately what it is. And that's where it goes back to that intersectionality of clinical knowledge, what was the other thing? Patient advocacy, and I forget and insurance guidelines. Like living within that realm is where I live, and ultimately, you are you're trying your best to save the patient money. That's really what you're doing. You're trying to make sure the insurance pays majority of that stay for the patient. So you are combing the clinical records. And sometimes what happens is, yes, the doctors write their HPI, history of present illness, history and physical, write their progress notes, and they're saying that the patient is type 2 diabetes. That's just the one that I see a lot. They have a diabetic ketoacidosis, my bad, right? They have diabetic ketoacidosis, but you don't see no ketones in the chart. You don't see no anion gap. You like, they went in the hospital. Why isn't any of this documented, right? So you got to pick up the phone and be like, hey, did you guys run these labs? Because it's not notated. And that's where the whole like compliance of things enters the chat, if you will, because it's like this patient is coming with a blood sugar of 600, right? Anion gap is 20. Do you see where I'm going? Ketones are dropsy in the urine. I know these things because it's charted, but if all you see in the H&P is diabetic ketoacidosis, like that's what they put as diagnosis. What do they say? Blood glucose 600, patient is in a coma, right? And then you look at labs blank. What? How are the labs blank? And you said these symptoms of the patient, but we don't have any other findings to validate what I need to click in interqual. And I'll never forget, part of my hesitancy of becoming a nurse that works remotely is, I'll never forget this. It was a male nurse. No offense. Like, this is no shade to male nurses. We love them. They help turn our patients and bring them up in the bed, right? I'll never forget though. I was really considering becoming case manager or just doing something that wasn't bedside. And the guy said to me, "I'm sorry, I've been shaking this table and probably shaking y'all. I am so sorry. Let me take my elbow off my desk." He was like, "Yeah, all those nurses do case management, utilization review nurses. Just click, click, click." No, we don't. It's a lot of critical thinking. Which, remember, in nursing school, that's all nursing school was critical thinking. You have to learn how to think outside of the box. And yes, in nursing school, it was like, with NCLEX, it's like it's a pristine hospital where it's a perfect world. I'll never forget that. They beat that into our head. But once you get into the hospital, it ain't no perfect world. You have to critically think of how you're going to manage that patient's DKA, right? And then so it's flip in this way of like, okay, you kind of have to read in between the lines, but at the same time, you can't click something if it's not documented. So that's where the phone calls come like, hey, I need you to make sure you put that in, right? So with that, so let's just keep going. So I shared a quick peek of my day. Okay, I already put my personal story. Y'all already know that. So what qualifications do you need, right? So you're like, Lazine, come on, because we're closing up the video, I promise. You need to have an active registered nursing license. That is required. I already said this, but just to recap, you need 2 to 3 years of bedside experience, med-surg, ICU, ED experience, like those type of things, because where I currently work, it is for a large hospital where they have a lot of sick people, right? And they're coming through the ED, and that's like the first review, that ED review, the initial review. And then I have to do a concurrent review. So I forgot to mention that to y'all. So you do the admission review, the initial review, right? Why they came. So they had DKA, and then you will do a concurrent review. This is dependent on insurance, place you work, but typically it's every 5 to 7 days. So in 5 to 7 days, I revisit the patient and I do what is called a concurrent review. So this is just recapping in my blurbsy, in my review, what the patient came in for, and then why is the patient still there, right? So with the DKA person, if his blood sugars are still over 250, I'm using that because in interqual, that is one of the findings when you do episode. So with interqual, it's episode days. When you start studying interqual, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But the initial review, so what's cool with interqual is you click interqual and it's already on your computer with your work, and you'll see what the main diagnosis is in the chart. Okay, so like at my job, in the chart, they'll put what was the admitting diagnosis. The admitting diagnosis was DKA. So when I click interqual to do my review, I will write DKA, or I can also write the ICD-10 code. The ICD-10 code is for billing purposes, and so you want to try your best to make the admitting diagnosis meet in interqual. I don't have all of like the data as to why, but you really want to try your best. Sometimes you're going to be like, the patient doesn't meet for DKA, they meet for sepsis, right? And so you'll have to like change that in the system. So either way though, you would put DKA, we're just going to use DKA, put DKA in interqual or the DKA ICD-10 diagnosis code. There's 2 separate boxes. Either one is fine. Click search. DKA comes up, and it's either adult or pediatric. I work in the adult population now. I click adult, then it gives you all of these guidelines. It tells you like to explain to you like, are you sure this is the correct subset? So each diagnosis in interqual is a subset, okay? So it tells you all the stuff. Diabetic ketoacidosis is if a patient has a blood sugar greater than this, the interventions are this, and even gives you like research citations of why it like rationale behind why they're saying all of this. You click begin, and then if it's the first day that the patient came in that you're doing the review for, and typically what this looks like too is, say the patient, today is May 8th, 2026. I don't know when you're watching this, but say my patient came in May 7th, right? I'm doing the review from yesterday, but in interqual, I'm doing it as day 1. That's how I do it at where I work, okay? So I do episode day 1, and then you click like diabetic ketoacidosis, symptoms. You click that, then you click the plus, and things drop down, drop down, drop down. It's a lot of drop down boxes, and you click the things that you found in the clinicals, in the history and physical. You click those things to matchy, and you click until the top right corner, there's gonna be something that's gonna be yellow at first. It's gonna say criteria not met. Once you click enough things that match, you don't just click for the sake of clicking, that male nurse that said that, you match, right? Then it will, that criteria not met in the top right corner turns green, and it says acute met, intermediate met, critical met. So dependent on the subset, I cannot remember with DKA, I think DKA is like observation critical. So it's like either like they go with that. So remember, I did bring this up. Observation status is you don't go upstairs, meaning like you don't get admitted. You don't get admitted. And if you don't get admitted, insurance typically is not going to foot the bill. Whereas critical, that means you got to go to ICU. They putting you on insulin drip. They giving you IV fluids. You see where we're going? You see where you're like, oh yeah, that's what I did in the hospital. Okay. All right. So how do you, okay, so if you're like, girl, I don't have experience, right? You're like, how do I break into utilization review with no experience? I already told you all this. Start by learning interqual or the MCG. Okay, I know nothing about MCG. I like to be very frank, but those are the two. Okay? There's some free resources exist online. I already told y'all, go on Optum, or just type interqual Optum. It'll come up. Look for hospital. I already said this. Not me knowing that. Okay. Look for hospital-based UR roles first. It's easier entry point because you already work in that hospital, right? It's easier entry point than the insurance companies. You want to tailor your resume to highlight your assessment, your documentation, and critical thinking skills. You got this. Like, you know how to document. Y'all know how it goes. I remember how it was. I'll be in the room, I'm documenting. Because if I leave that room, I forget, right? And if you don't chart it, it didn't happen. And so the same thing applies working remotely, especially working remotely. If you're not writing up stuff, they think you didn't do shit. Sorry. Okay. And then you want to network, right? LinkedIn is very powerful. I'm just talking like how I talk. My LinkedIn right now is tailored to my side business, which Leslie Does Wellness LLC has now turned into the Breath Between Wellness Collective. If you connect with me over there, you're going to see the Breath Between Wellness Collective. You're going to see my side hustle. In this economy, the girls need a side hustle, right? But if you're like, I'm just focusing on my professional career, that's why you're here. Go on LinkedIn and start connecting with utilization review nurses, start connecting with other nurses, start just talking about, being a nurse and what it means. Like, we can make a whole video about how you can curate your LinkedIn. And if you have questions or want one-on-one support, let me know down below. But yeah, that is everything. And I'm just looking just to make sure. Okay, so pros and cons. The pros are the work-life balance, remote opportunities, Monday to Friday schedule typically. You still get to use your clinical brain. And I actually like where I currently work because it's back to the adults. I told y'all I've never worked pediatric with the exception. And that's, that's how I got the NICU job, because I had experience working with kids in the case management with children's medical services. So that gave me a leg up for them to like, she'll be fine. She'll figure out the babies, right? But now working for the adult population, I'm like, damn, I missed this. Because with my business, I have my own 12-week preventative healthcare program. And so everything I'm reading now for these patients and as I'm doing my clinical reviews is actually solidifying that my 12-week preventative health program is definitely needed. The cons of working remotely, it's less hands-on patient interaction. So a lot of people, not a lot of people, but there are some people, I'm afraid I'm going to lose that bedside experience and that hands-on patient interaction, and you will. It can feel isolating at first. Production quotas can be very stressful. It's all about production. So just to put things into context, that was weird. Where I used to work, I needed to do 12 reviews a day. Where I currently work, I got to do 20. Okay, so that means you have to touch 20 people a day. And dependent on how good the clinicals are, sometimes like one review could take me like 15 minutes. Sometimes it could take a little bit longer if the clinicals are shit. Okay. And what else? Steep learning curve on the criteria. So if you don't know anything, like you're like remote, like that's what you see, just know it's going to be a steep learning curve, okay? And you have to be very patient with yourself and ask questions. So if you're a bedside nurse who is burned out, we're closing out this video, underpaid, or just ready for something different, utilization review might be exactly what you've been looking for. Drop UR in the comments if this resonated with you, and let me know if you want me to do a deep dive on how to write a UR resume and land your first UR interview. Don't forget to like this video. Subscribe. Double, triple check that you're subscribed. I think it's that way. Or if you're watching the video, it's that way. Okay? And I'll see you in the next one. Same time, same place tomorrow, because your girl's doing 100 days of YouTube. Today is day 94 or 95. And over the course of this almost 100 days, I've been looking at my data, and the girls want to know how to work remote. So I got you. All right. Bye for now.